What's up, y'all? I'm back at it once again, the Koski and Fun Day. And, I'm here dropping this knowledge for you and for yours. The channel I've been picking up, again, responses and good stuff in other places. And I'd like to thank y'all for that. Much love to all of y'all. But, this one right here, this video, first, before I get into this video, besides thanking y'all, I gotta thank my ancestors for making this stuff possible, making it happen. And this one right here is from the Institute of the Black World 20th Century. NAARC rolls out a preliminary 10-point reparation plan. Now, I did a couple of videos from this group, the IBW21 War. They're pretty good. And just picking up where they left off at. The National African American Reparation Commission, the NAARC, rolls out a preliminary 10-point reparation plan at the Congressional Black Caucus Conference 2015. Congressman, you got to get John Connors. You know what I'm saying? So we don't go into the preamble. No amount of resources or monetary compensation can ever be sufficient in restitution for the spiritual, mental, cultural, and physical damage inflicted on Africans of centuries of the MAAFA, the Holocaust of enslavement, and the institutional chattel slavery. These crimes against black humanity, as affirmed by the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, were responsible for the death of millions of Africans who were ripped from their families and nations to labor their enrichment in industry, commercial, and financial institutions and individuals in Europe and the United States. In large measure, the wealth of the new American nation was accumulated from centuries of free labor brutally extracted from enslaved Africans, and with the abolishment of slavery, the emancipation sons and daughters of Africa suffered systematically often violent repression, oppression, exploitation, and deprivation under Southern apartheid and de facto segregation in every region of this nation. A political and economic system infected with white supremacy and the structural institutional racism persists in retiring the dreams and aspirations of a people courageously striving to sustain families, build institutions, and create healthy communities in hostile lands. The devastating damages of the enslavement and the systems of apartheid and de facto segregation span generations as a negative affects the collective well-being of Africans and Americans to this very moment. Indeed, despite civil and human rights gains achieved by black freedom struggle, the crisis continues to plague millions of black people with incontrovertible proof that the disease of white supremacy still permeates the social, economic, and political culture, structure, and institutions of the system of the society. The fulfillment of a more perfect union is not possible without the unequivocal acknowledgement of and the unqualified apology of the original sin committed by the European colonists in brutally dispossessing the native people of their lands and the heroic enslavement of Africans to be the economic lifeblood of the American nation. A nation conceived to be a white man's land. A more perfect union must be predicated on a new covenant which acknowledges the crimes against humanity committed by the European colonists, the founding fathers of this nation, and their progeny. In granting of reparations as a restitution to repair and heal damages done to native people and Africans. As a matter of principle, each aggrieved and affected and offended people must speak for themselves on behalf of our African ancestors and the succeeding generations of unsung heroes and heroines who have fought, historically kept the fight for reparations alive until the present day, which includes the following: Sherman Field Order 15 and the promises of 40 acres, the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association, led by Sister Casey House, the Universal United Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA under the leadership of Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, the Nation of Islam under the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Queen Mother Moore and a Reparations Committee of the Descendants of United States Slaves, Inc., the Republic of New Africa, RNA, and Dr. Onwe Abowale, James Foreman and his Black Manifesto reparations demands, the National Coalition of Reparation for Blacks in America, and COBRA, reparation activist Reparations Ray Jenkins, Congressman John Connors, Massachusetts State Senator Bill Owens, Malcolm X, and the United Front of NBUF and the December 12 movement that mobilized the Durban 400. Therefore, the National African American Reparation Commission, the NAARC, demands that the government of this nation acknowledge the unspeakable crimes committed against African people through enslavement, the institutional chattel slavery, and the system of de jure and the de facto segregation, and among other discrimination, denial, and exclusion which will have severely damaged black people for across generations. We further declare our intent to relentlessly pursue locally and state governments and private institutions directly engaged with or complicit in these crimes. Pursuant with the fulfillment of the historic mission, the National African American Commission, in consultation with its broad representation of the reparations movement in America, will establish a National Reparations Trust Authority to be the repository custodian of the administrative body to receive the monetary and material resources allocated by offending parties as restitution to repair the damages inflicted on the sons and daughters of Africa and America during the centuries of oppression and exploitation. The National Reparations Trust Authority will be comprised of a cross-section of credible representatives of reparations, civil rights, human rights, labor, faith, educational, civic, and fraternal organizations and institutions. It will be empowered to establish a subsidiary of trust funds to administer projects and initiatives in the area of culture, economic development, education, health, and other fields deemed appropriate based on the demands of this reparation program. While the National Reparations Trust Fund is envisioned as consensus of as a mechanism for the repository of various forms of restitution, NAARC recognizes and respects the rights of other black organizations or agencies to pursue such compensation at the local, state, and national level as well. We are resolved to educate, mobilize, and organize African people and all people of conscience and goodwill to compel this nation to acknowledge and apologize for the wrong of the past and present and provide the massive resources required to begin and repair the healing. Therefore, we advance a comprehensive program for reparatory justice. Number 1, a formal apology and establishment of a MAAFA African Holocaust Institute. A, we demand a formal apology for the role the U.S. government played in explicitly and inexplicitly participating in, encouraging, and sanctioning the European slave trade, the institution of slavery, of chattel slavery. The apology should be initiated by the President and ratified by Congress by roll call vote. B, furthermore, the apology be accompanied by the establishment of a permanent MAAFA African Holocaust Institute charged with providing public education on the origins of enslavement, the role of private and public institutions in initiating and sustaining it, and the systems of legal and de facto segregation and the post-emancipation to the present. The damages, harm inflicted on the people individually and collectively, and the wealth and benefits of the local, state, and federal government, private institutions, and white society in general, derived from these white supremacist institutions and structurally racist policies and practices. Number 2, the right of reparations and the creation of an African Knowledge Program. The descendants of millions of Africans who were stolen from Africa and transported to strange lands in the Americas against their will to enrich their captors have a right to return to their motherland in the African nature of their choice. Africans in America who choose to exercise the right to return will be provided with sufficient monetary resources to become productive citizens in their new home, and shall be aided in their resettlement by a black-controlled agency funded by the federal government to perform such function. B, reparations program will be complemented by an African Knowledge Program similar to the one included in the CARCON Reparations Commission's 10-point program of reparatory justice. This program will serve as a bridge to the barriers to the healing of the wounds between African Americans in the U.S. and Africans on the continent, resulting from centuries of enslavement, cultural alienation, misinformation, and divide and conquer exploit schemes initiated by the Europeans and the American slave traders, colonialists, neo-colonialists. Emotional emancipation healing circles, research missions, and cultural education exchange to build bridges of belonging will be part of such program. 3, the right to land for social and economic development. For after centuries of free labor that has fueled commercial and industrial revolutions in the U.S. and enriched those at the helm of capital and finance and created opportunities and a sense of privilege for Europeans of every social economic strata, enslaved Africans were emancipated without being granted a material stake in the form of land and resources, i.e. 40 acres and a mule, to start anew in this hostile land. Moreover, former enslaved Africans were excluded from government programs like the Homestead Act, which greatly benefited the poor, white, working class, and corporations. Post-emancipation land owned by blacks were often stolen through trickery, fraud, discrimination policies, and practices. These policies and practices were rampant in the Department of Agriculture, especially as carried out by the agriculture extension agencies in the South. They dramatically stunted the growth and led to the bankruptcy of untold numbers of black farmers. Therefore, we demand A substantive tract of government public land in the South and other regions of the country be transferred to the National Reparations Trust Authority with full autonomy in terms of equivalent to the sovereignty grant to native peoples over reservations awarded to them. These lands are to be utilized for major educational, commercial, industrial, economic business, health, wellness institutions, and enterprises that benefit the people of African descent. B. Funds to support the restoration and enhancement of agricultural development, including grants and loans to limited resource farmers to enable them to expand and compete in the U.S. and global economy. 4. Funds for the cooperative enterprise and social responsible entrepreneurial development. Despite amazing efforts during the colonial, Revolutionary War, Civil War, post-emancipation eras to the present day, historically, the quest to build a viable, sustained black business economic infrastructure has been thwarted by blacks being pushed out of sectors of the economy like carpentry, brick masonry, catering, tailoring, and other skills and craft, which they dominated in favor of whites. The malicious destruction of thriving business districts like Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and towns like Rosewood by white terrorist attacks, the systematic strangulation of black towns like Haiti, North Carolina, urban renewal, Negro removal programs that gutted black businesses in numerous cities and towns, and discriminatory lending practices which denied black businesses the capital needs to survive and develop on a competitive basis. Therefore, we demand resources to support a cooperative enterprise and social responsible entrepreneurial development. A. Funds to develop infrastructure for strategic, financial, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and technology-oriented business and economic enterprise for the benefit of Black America as a whole. These enterprises will be managed by the Board of Trustees and appointed by the National Reparations Trust Authority. B. Funds for the establishment of a Black Business Development Bank to provide grants, loans, and social responsible for-profit entrepreneurship economic ventures dedicated to the building of black community and utilizing just labor practices and sustainable environmental practices. 5. The resource of health and wellness and the healing of the black families and community. The intergenerational psychocultural, mental, spiritual, and physical damages of post-traumatic slavery syndrome, the daily toll of racism on individuals, families, and communities, and the lingering effects of chronic health disparity resulting from structural institutional racism are well documented by leading black psychologists and psychiatrists, and physicians. Moreover, many public hospitals and medical facilities that traditionally serve black communities have either forced to close or ill-equipped to serve a full range of services for lacking in adequate funding. Therefore, we demand A. Funds for the establishment of a regional system of black-controlled health wellness centers fully equipped with highly qualified personnel in the best 21st century facility to offer culturally appropriate, holistic, preventive, mental, and curative treatment services. B. Funds to strengthen the existence of hospitals and medical centers serving the community, i.e. Harlem Hospital, Howard Medical University Center, and the reopening of such institutions that primarily serves black communities due to the close or lack of funds. C. Funds to the strengthening institutions like Marymount Hall Medical College and scholarships for students interested in attending these institutions are committing and providing services to the black community. D. Resources to fully operationalize and institutionalize the use of emancipation, health circles as a methodology to address and overcome the damages of post-traumatic slavery syndrome, the racism as a disease infecting American culture and institutions. The aforementioned health and wellness programs are to be implemented in consultation with the the National Medical Association, the National Dental Association, the National Association of Black Nurses, Black Psychiatrists of America, Association of Black Psychiatrists Inc., and all healers and mental health alliance and similar organizations, institutions, and agencies. Number 6, education for community development and empowerment. Africans in America have acquired knowledge and produced great inventions, built institutions, and developed extraordinary leaders despite the calculated efforts to deny black people an education and or promulgation of misinformation designed to destroy their identity, self-esteem, and instill obedience in an oppressive system. During enslavement, blacks could be punished or even killed for learning to read. Post-emancipation, the vast majority of black young people have been confined to separate and severely under-resourced schools during illegal and de facto segregation. These conditions prevail today in what is sometimes called poor-performing schools. In higher education, African Americans have courageously endeavored to build and maintain a system of historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, many of them which are struggling to survive. Therefore, we demand an allocation of funds for the expansion and consolidation of the National Board of Education of African Ancestry as a body to devise standards and accreditation for African-centered education programming, predominantly black public schools throughout the country. B, the provision of monetary and material incentives by the federal government to the school districts with adopted and implemented a curriculum of inclusion of history, culture of the people of African descent in the United States. C, funds to strengthen the historically black colleges and universities as the indispensable backbone of a higher education infrastructure in black America. D, funding of endowments to provide free education for students attending HBCUs who are committed to provide service to black communities. 7, affordable housing in healthy black communities and wealth generation. Historically, black people of African descent were denied equitable access to programs within agencies like the Federal Housing Administration, FAA, which white Americans utilized to create prosperous suburbs across the nation and create wealth that could be transferred intergenerationally. Blacks were often victimized by discriminatory practices covenants that restricted them to certain neighborhoods, redlining by banks, which refused to make loans into individuals and businesses, and targeted the neighborhood, most recently subprime lending schemes, which resulted in billions of dollars of loss of wealth in forms of home equity. The intergenerational deficit in terms of wealth creation has stunted the social and economic development in black families and communities. We therefore demand funding for our African Housing and Finance Authority to A, finance and plans the construction of a holistic and sustainable villages with affordable housing and comprehensive cultural education, health and wellness, employment and economic services. B, function as a source of grants and loans for a person seeking affordable housing. Number 8, strengthening black Americans' information and communication infrastructure. From the early days of the forced migration of Africans to settle these hostile shores, communication vehicles like the black press have been critical to survival and the development of the black community. Black Americans' information and communication infrastructure was built and survives despite operating in a hostile environment and the absence of substantial public and private resources, more readily available to the white individual in the corporate information and communication media. The most recent conglomerate of electronic and the print media, with the blessing of the federal government, has been devastating to the majors of black Americans' information and communication infrastructure. Therefore, we demand A federal set-aside support advertising black dollars to support black businesses, black-owned newspapers and media. These funds will be administered by the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the NAAP, and the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters, NABOB, under the guidance of the Reparations Trust Authority. B. Funding for a national nonprofit, non-commercial newspaper, radio, and television network dedicated exclusively to the cultural education, economic business, and the civil engagement and program for the benefit of African America. Number 9. Preserving black sacred sites and monuments. The struggle for freedom and dignity and self-determination and community and national development is the saga of a people in a strange land resisting, surviving, maintaining families, building institutions, and creating a future in the face of unspeakable oppression, exploitation, terror, and violence. All across this land, there are slave quarters, hundreds of sites where black people were lynched, and locales where black towns and institutions were destroyed. But there are also black burial grounds, black towns, i.e. Nicodemus, Kansas, Mount Bio, Mississippi, houses of worship, meeting halls, one-room schools, and other significant institutions that speak of the triumphant quest of a determined people to create a new African community in this hostile land. These black sacred sites and monuments should be preserved as permanent memorials to continue to inform and inspire future generations of African people of African descent about the legacy of the trials, tribulations, and triumph, and to remind America of the white supremacist terror employed to destruct the path for the freedom of African Americans. Therefore, we demand A. The federal government, BI, National Parks and Services, erect markers on every site where a black person was lynched and where a massacre of black people was committed, and sites where black towns and neighborhoods were destroyed. B. The refunds of preservation for black burial grounds and other significant cultural and historical sites. C. Funds to conduct research to identify previously unknown black sacred sites and monuments. Number 10. Repairing the damages of the criminal injustice system. Ever since the forced arrival of enslaved Africans in America, policing and penal policies and practices entitled discipline and control and acclimate black people to the system of exploitation. The criminal injustice system, which evolved, is in direct incision to protect the interests of the corporate and the political elites in the U.S. From runaway slave patrols, vagrancy laws, chain gangs, and a convict leasing system to a relentless police violence, killings, and mass incarceration, racist policies, and practice that decimated black communities and severely strained civil rights, human rights, and the social, economic, and political aspirations of black people. The war on drugs, with its attendant racial bias policies and practices of the most recent manifestations of the long-standing war on black people. It has disrupted millions of African black families and severely across the black community across the country. The criminal injustice system has been a persistent source of resentment, resistance, and rebellion by black people. Apologies from elected officials, leaders, and institutions responsible for fostering and benefiting political from this injustice system are not sufficient. The damages to the black family community must be repaired. Therefore, we demand A. A substantive resource to establish a black control agency for returning citizens, to fund centers in black communities nationwide, and to provide culturally appropriate counseling, career development services, and job employment training for the formerly incarcerated persons, to provide grants and to create entrepreneurial business opportunities in community damaged by mass incarceration. B. Restore voting rights of all formerly incarcerated persons. C. Exonerate the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey as the first victim of COINTELPRO type operation by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. D. The release of all political prisoners and prisoners of war unjustly convicted of acts of conscience, committing resistance, and defending black people from oppressive censorship. E. Revising and amending the 13th Amendment of the Constitution will formally abolish slavery to delete the clause except for punishment for a crime which the party shall be duly convicted shall exist within the United States, or any phrase to the subject or place in their jurisdiction, which applies black people who were convicted of crimes can be legally held in bondage. And that's a 10-point program right there. This is some very, very deep stuff. Some stuff that I'm a part of. I'm proud to be a part of and make stuff happen like that in my area and in the national area. So I'm gonna leave their reference. I'm gonna leave their stuff in a reference where you can get in contact with these people if you're interested. Joining this and putting your best foot forward and doing your thing with them, because all this stuff is true, and these are good brothers and sisters who coming up with a plan of attack. To get our stuff on back and get our stuff straight. Back to nation building. So this is a Iskosi of Fun Day, and hope y'all learned something, and subscribe to the channel. Peace.